Hello, everyone. Today we're talking about a very important topic, resilience and grit, something that I've been very interested in for some time and done some research with that and pertains to all of us. Here we see this image of a weed or a plant that will be undeterred and will grow and flourish despite its harsh asphalt surroundings. So, grit really is uh, an important topic. And Angela Duckworth is a researcher who has kind of put this topic on the map. And uh, her definition of grit is the tendency or the ability to maintain interest in an effort towards long-term goals despite obstacles. So grit and resilience is depicted by the individual who is able to maintain focus and stay on a path towards a goal despite whatever life or surrounding circumstances may throw at them. And Dr. Duckworth did a lot of research looking at West Point cadets, different age levels of students, athletes, and so forth, looking at the correlation between intelligence or capability and outcomes or performances. And often there's a lot of difference. Highly capable individuals often do not perform at levels that they should be able to, and also individuals with less capability perform at high levels because of that perseverance and that determination and that grit. Uh, as you see at the bottom of the slide, I did conduct a survey a couple of years ago, or a research study, sorry, looking at grit and a possible correlation in academic performance in DPT students, and we did find a significant correlation between students who scored highly on resilience and grit also had higher grade point averages during grad school. So there certainly are a lot of applications of this, and we can use this with our patients, trying to uh, identify and develop greater levels of grit in our patients as they go through whatever experience they may be having. Uh, and looking at the broader picture, looking at research that examines wellness, and basically a lot of the outcomes of this research have been that if grit is kind of a way to get to holistic wellness. Individuals who are able to demonstrate grit and perseverance, determination, and identify wellness as a desired objective tend to perform better arriving at that level. So when we look back at the research of resilience, initially years ago, resilience was discussed in the literature, uh, kind of talking about subjects who had experienced early trauma in life, and this is in the psychological literature, and a lot of individuals who experienced many different forms of trauma responded to that by demonstrating resilience. The more current stream of literature would indicate that you don't have to have a history of trauma per se, sexual trauma, physical trauma that's, really significant to, you don't have to have that in your past to develop resilience and grit. We all have stresses and challenges and trials that we face. And so maybe a more modern approach to resilience is that we all have challenges and all of us can develop and utilize resilience and grit to our benefit. So, resilience, kind of defined, is strength in the midst of change and stressful life events, and how we respond to life. And because we all do, nobody is immune to challenges, and so the ability to respond to those is one way to look at resilience. Um, and so you had an assignment associated with today's lecture, just basically defining adversity or tribulation. We've all gone through those. Some of us have very dramatic stories and experiences. Others of us have uh, maybe an absence of a real significant singular event, but all of us dealing with life. And each of you surviving DPT grad school are experiencing adversity and tribulation. That's kind of unavoidable. And so, as we look at our own lives and things that we've gone through, it's valuable for each of us to consider that, reflect on that, and how have we dealt with this? Did this trial define us in a negative way, in a positive way? Did we overcome the challenge? And if so, how did we do that? Lance Armstrong is perhaps a controversial figure, setting aside all of his performance-enhancing drug uh, controversy. Just the statement, he's one that most of us are aware of, who was diagnosed with testicular cancer and against all odds was able to overcome that. And just the statement, I owe my life to cancer. Many of us have individuals in our lives close to us who have been affected by cancer, and the ability to kind of turn our perspective a little bit, and someone who has been a cancer survivor or a survivor of any other type of trauma, they often have this perspective of they are who they are and they are alive because of this trial that came in their life and the way that they reacted to it. So then we look at coping styles when we consider tribulations and trials that come in our lives, and it's basically what kind of response occurs. And I like the way this is worded, the process of executing a response. So when somebody has a challenge come in their life, there is a process of how they respond to that. And when somebody is successfully fighting or struggling successfully against a challenge, that would be a positive, helpful coping style. So here we have a hopefully humorous example of how individuals either focus on the problem or focus on their emotional response to the problem. These two gentlemen have exercised the incredible self-control to only have one drink at lunch. Unfortunately, it's a 780-ounce drink, and so maybe they're not as productive in the afternoon after they focus this way with their challenge. So research looking at individuals' responses to adversity. Carver is a researcher who has developed this idea of succumbing to or giving up when faced with a trial, compared to thriving and being better because of a trial that someone faced. So, all of us, when we're faced with something, whether it's relatively minor and not real dynamic or something that's very significant and very dynamic, we all have the opportunity to give up in that situation, succumb to the challenge, or any of these other steps, hopefully the goal being to thrive or step up, use that challenge as a bridge, if you will, to being a better, stronger person. So when these individuals thrive and have that optimal response to a challenge, they develop new skills and knowledge because of what they went through. They also have increased confidence because they are able to say, I survived this. I'm sure I can use these experiences to apply to future challenges. And then finally, strengthening personal relationships. Very often when an individual is experiencing a significant challenge, this does not happen in a vacuum. And so friends, family, significant others who are instrumental in assisting the individual to thrive become a very important part of the equation. This is just a little sequence of, so this is a little bit of an example of ourselves or our patients may find themselves in these cycles of behavior or thought processes that are not helpful. We all have maybe repetitive challenges in our lives, and that are, or relationships or behaviors, habits, whatever they may be. And part of resilience is looking at ourselves, self-awareness, and saying, okay, this relationship is not helpful to me, I'm going to end it. Or this behavior choice or habit that I have, a routine that I have is not helpful, I'm going to move away from that. So you can read your walking down the street story here on your own time. So protective factors are kind of also factors that relate to resilience and grit. And so when we have these stressors come into our lives that will inevitably happen, these areas are important for individuals. Just personal hardiness, being able to withstand challenges, our self-esteem. We'll talk a little bit more about that in this lecture. Our social support, our optimism, our positive affect. So these are all, and you can look at this reference down at the bottom if you're interested to learn a little bit more about this study that kind of talks about protective factors. So when an individual demonstrates resilience, these are some of the outcomes, reasons why it's so valuable. Really, we can have control of our physical and mental health. And we can, when we struggle with a challenge in one area of our life, we can then relate that to identify ways to use that experience in different areas of our life. And so resilience is definitely helpful on an individual level, and these individuals who are more resilient will access the healthcare system less often. So now we'll take a little bit of time to look at these different aspects of resilience: physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. Physical resilience, I think, is the most obvious for physical therapy students. You know, when we talked about wellness in class, Jake very adeptly talked about wellness has many aspects. It's not just physical. There's spiritual and social and intellectual and so forth. Same with resilience. Physical resilience is one aspect of resilience. And so just having our physical vessel, our bodies, be as healthful or healthy and able to adapt with change is very, very important. Positive attitude correlates with higher immune function. Having positive, helpful social connections promote healing. And then, of course, avoiding unhealthy coping behaviors. All of these areas relate to physical resilience. Then we get to mental and emotional resilience. These three areas are real important. Stimulating ourselves intellectually. I am absolutely sure that's happening for each of you students. But then we look at our psychological optimism. How do we look at different situations that come our way, and our emotional centeredness? So we'll talk a little bit more about these aspects. These are maybe the less obvious and less tangible, very personal areas that relate to resilience that we can and should all be working on. And so this quote is great. Resilient individuals have optimistic, zestful, energetic approaches to life. That curiosity to new experiences is incredibly important. And we take that curiosity to new patients as well. When we have a new patient that we are meeting, that curiosity and openness to learn about them helps us. Of course, it affects our relationships with our patients, but it also helps us on a personal, mental, emotional resilience level. So now we get to reframing, which is a wonderful part of resilience. This kind of relates to that mental, emotional resilience, that ability to have psychological optimism. So basically, looking at a situation in a different way and reframing that. So something that's challenging and maybe discouraging becomes something that's helpful. And before I end this part one, I'll tell the story of a man on a subway who early in the morning gets on a New York subway. He's exhausted, he's overwhelmed. All he wants to do is read his newspaper. He had to walk quite a ways to get on the subway car, so he sits down on the quiet, calm, peaceful subway car and is reading his paper. The next station, the doors open, and in comes three kids and a mother, and the kids are all very misbehaved, crying, running, jumping, causing chaos. And the man is initially incredibly frustrated and annoyed because his quiet subway car has just been affected. And so as he's going through all these emotions, the mother says to him, "I'm so sorry about my kids. We're just coming from the hospital and their father has passed away. I don't know what I'm going to do to help them." And so now this man's feelings completely changed, and now he has empathy and sorrow for these kids. And so he has reframed his entire state of mind based on understanding the situation. So this concludes part one, and I'll see you on the other side with part two.